Using a 300 Blackout cartridge has a super and a subsonic component. You can use, and you can do this for 308 as well, but using 300 Blackout, the old saying is a 25-yard zero is, this 25-yard supersonic zero, is the 50-yard subsonic zero. So you can use your ballistic calculator. It has two columns. It has path, right? That's the arc of the bullet. And it has another column, which has always bothered me for years. I was like, what do we use the, what do they call it? The drop. Yeah, it's called the drop. What do you use the drop for? So the drop is straight and level and how far the bullet falls if it's straight and level. So here's how you use that. Let's say I put in a 25-yard supersonic zero, and I'll show that to you what it is. The supersonic zero is, I'm using the Nikon Spot On app. The supersonic 25-yard zero, I select Federal in the Spot On when you're using brands because it has a super and a subsonic right there. I don't have to scan through all the calibers to try to find the exact bullet. So this is pretty close. 25-yard zero drops, not the path, but drops it's negative 4.4 inches at 100 yards. That is negative 4.4 MOA, right? So if we're going to bring it up, you can see the path with a 25-yard zero is actually 4.3 inches higher than zero. It's positive 4.3. So what does that mean? All right, well, that means that the difference between those two is 8.7 inches, which is 8.7 MOA. So in order for me to, when I put in a 25-yard zero, I'm actually going to wind up dialing 8.7 MOA, the scope, 8.7 MOA up from dead level. All right, well, what does that mean exactly? Well, 8.7 MOA, if you'll go over to the subs, here's a subsonic, for instance, a 220 grain. That's a little fast on this one. They're putting it at 1,000 feet per second starters. It's not. An 8-inch barrel is probably more like, 950, maybe even a little less. But in any case, if you'll see at the 100 yards, it is negative 17.7 on the straight and level drop. So if we have dialed in 8.7 MOA, then it's actually going to drop 9 inches at 100 yards, right? So that's really not, that's something to consider, is that your subsonic will be 9 inches low at 100, but that's not really what we're trying to find out. We're trying to find out the thing above it, which is the 50-yard zero. Now, with a 50-yard zero, the bullet would behave in a manner that would put it 4.4 inches below. This is on the drop, by the way. If you had it zeroed at 50, then you would expect it, not expect it, but if the bullet normally would drop 4.4 inches. So if you wanted a 50-yard zero for your subsonic, then you would need to dial it up 4.4 inches, or 8.8 MOA, right? 8.8 MOA, 88 inches at 100, is half that at 50. So if you wanted to dial it up and get you a 50-yard zero, you would add 8.8 MOA into the scope, which would dial you up 4.4 inches. Well, what did you do on the supersonics? On the supersonics, you dialed it up negative 4.4 plus 4.3. You dialed it up 8.7 inches. Geez, that's pretty close, right? So you can see that when you dialed it up 8.7 inches, you've actually brought it up 4.35 inches. And you needed to bring it up 4.4, right? So the 25-yard zero is the 25-yard super zero is the 50-yard sub-zero. You can use the drop category to do the calculations on that. You can also estimate, it's estimates of course, your gun will vary, but You can also estimate that if we're dropping it 8.7 MOA, 8.7 inches at 100, and it normally drops, the subsonic normally drops 17.7, well, that means that you should expect about a 9-inch hit below the 100-yard supersonic impact point of impact. So that's going to be, point of aim, actually. That's going to be 9 inches below point of aim. So the point of aim at 100, it will hit 9 inches below that. The point of impact for supersonic is actually 4 inches, 4.3 inches above point of aim. So you're aiming at 100. Supersonics hit 4.3 inches high. You probably have a pattern of about 4 inches, we'll say. Plus or minus 2 inches on top of that. So it looks like there's going to be between 4 inches high and 9 inches low. Expect a 13-inch disparity between point of impact of supers and point of impact on subs. Call it 12 inches if you want. You can call it 13 inches, which is pretty interesting considering that a lot of scopes have a 13 MOA triangle. So at least I know some of the tritium scopes I've used in the past have that. But a 13-inch disparity between point of impact and point of impact on subs and supers is really the point of aim, 4 inches high on supers and 9 inches low on the subs. So then really it's just a matter of learning your holds, of course. But I found that on the subsonics, expect about 50 yards with a 50-yard zero. Factor in 10 inches of drop at 100. Factor in 20 inches of drop at 150, and factor in about 50 inches of drop at 200. Now, if you can see in the path. Now, this is again below the point of aim, right? Below the dot. So the supersonic hits will be different. They're at likely above the dot, right? So what we've got here is at 150, 21 point, basically 22 inches, and at 200 about 47 inches. Again, I think the velocity is a little lower, with an 8-inch gun. But these are just, these are based on 22 long rifle subsonics. And 300 Blackout has a better ballistic coefficient. Has a lot of different variables to consider. But anyway, that's using the drop to calculate where the bullet will impact, given a supersonic, where the subsonic bullet will impact when you're holding a supersonic zero. And that's it. That's you probably could do 308 as well. Matter of fact, let me go back to supersonic and see just where those guys are hitting. So, yeah, with the supersonic, they're 2 inches high at 50, 4 inches high at 100, 4 inches high at 150, and basically zeroed at, they're about 0.4 inches high at 200, and -7 at 250. The 25-yard supersonic zero usually has a zero of 220, 25 and 220. Zeroed again just past 200 yards, and this is indicative of that if you look at the path. So I've tried to keep this basic, but again, I do like the Nikon Spot On app. It's, again, pretty basic. You don't have to dial in coefficient or drag or G1 or any of that stuff is already in there. I did dial in 2.6 inches height over bore in the settings. I think the default is 1.5, but I did dial in that for the extra AR-15 height over bore.